Watch where that camera angle's at. Sigmund Bloom, Matt Waldman, and now the Audible Live with more Dr. Jene Bramel returning to the program. Dr. Jene, what's up, fella? How you living, man?
I am good. More is some, I guess, for me right now. More is any. Yeah, it's good to be back with you. Thank you for having me back.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. So we've got to talk about banged up players, and I want to know about Andrew Luck. I want to know what the feeling is. What are they calling it? Calf now? In addition to the shoulder, we're already worried about like Andrew Luck missing time in mini camps and OTAs should be okay for training camp. That's fine, but do you think it's fine?
Yeah, I generally don't worry too much about veteran players missing mini caps. Sometimes you worry about guys like Sony Michele or others who have chronic injuries that we're worried about. A new soft tissue injury for Andrew Luck, a calf strain, is not going to affect him. I wouldn't think that much. There's really no reason to put him out there during OTAs and risk anything lingering a little bit longer. So unless he fails his pre-camp physical and we see him start on the PUP list and it sounds like a longer term situation, I don't think there's much to worry about with him.
Gene, first I want to say that I'm really excited tonight because I live in New Orleans now, and I haven't had an NBA team, so I'm excited. I thought I was as excited as I was going to be when Zion Williamson, who has the same birthday as me, was announced as the first pick. But then I heard you were coming back, and this has been, this is one of the best nights of my life.
So you are the only person in New Orleans that feels that way, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, we're going to get working on that. So listen, this has been the talk of fantasy football circles for like 2 months. And we look to you, Dr. Gene, in these troubled times to give us some sort of sign about Todd Gurley. And I like to appeal in these moments, Gene, to you as a fantasy football player, not just as Dr. Gene, because we have to quantify something unquantifiable, which is the risk factor of Todd Gurley's knee, how much it's going to diminish what he's capable of this year. Obviously, we're going to learn more in August, but I would guess he's going to practice on some limited schedule. A full schedule would be nice. Probably not play in the preseason, maybe play a series. So we kind of know what we know. What do we know?
Yeah, why would he practice? I think, I think the upshot of all this is the truth is somewhere in between. I don't think we need to be scared to death of Todd Gurley, but the Rams, since last December, have told us what's going on. His knee is not fully healthy. They are comfortable if they've got a viable option behind him, using him in a more limited and hopefully higher upside role. And we generally don't see stud running backs who look healthy in this kind of limited role. We've seen wide receivers do this over the years. We've seen tight ends. We talk about this with Rob Gronkowski and Calvin Johnson and DeAndre Hopkins and T.Y. Hilton. The list goes on and on and on. But this is one of the few times where we hear a team say, our player is healthy as can be. We're worried about him, but we're going to limit his upside by probably having somebody else come in and take some carries from him. And that's what the Rams have told us since before the NFC Championship game last year. You can say he's healthy, and you can like what C.J. Anderson is doing in the playoffs, but to allow your arguably best offensive player to only take 10 to 20 snaps / touches a game tells you that they weren't comfortable with the state of his knee. And we know, the Rams can dance and Sean McVay can dance around the topic of, is it arthritic? Is it not arthritic? What are we saying about this knee or not? But we know he's got a degenerative condition. I don't think there's any reason to doubt that at all. We saw them make a move on Malcolm Brown and bring him back when they had a chance to get Darrell Henderson. That's what they did. They're already saying they're looking for ways to limit and rest him a little bit. But 15 to 20 carries of Todd Gurley is still a very, very strong player. You are asking whether or not we can quantify the risk of how much practice time he's going to get, how soon may his knee blow up and cause a little bit of an issue, if at all. And I don't know that we know the answer to that. For years and years and years, we kind of always reference Maurice Jones-Drew, or I do anyway, and Marquez Colston as players that we heard of with significant arthritic conditions, arguably bone-on-bone conditions, that really didn't miss much time at all and played effectively throughout the season with or without some limited and managing practice. So I don't think, even though we're worried about Todd Gurley, I think because we've been told that he's not going to get probably anything close to 300 touches. That doesn't mean that he's only going to get 125 and that he is going to be limited in practice from the first week on and not be able to be productive at all. The idea between having all this backup plan is so that you get as healthy of a Todd Gurley as you can, and you don't feel obligated to put him into your game plan and have him practice on Wednesday and Thursday as much as you might have otherwise. But I think if you see a healthy Todd Gurley in the first couple of weeks of the season, you might see him get a few more carries. And, it's just hard to know. We know that it's a little bit of an issue. Whether or not it's going to be an issue this year or not is hard to know. I am comfortable saying that I don't think Todd Gurley is going to have a 12-year career in the NFL at this point. Although we've seen guys like Adrian Peterson and others do that with multiple knee situations that might lead to degenerative conditions. But the Rams are telling us that we're probably looking at a 200 to 225 touch player. But I don't think we need to be so concerned about him where we think that he's not going to get any playing time at all.
Yeah, it sounds like it's like asking if we'd be concerned about Marlon Mack, who gets 220 touches. So, but speaking of a player who has been constantly injured throughout his career and really hasn't done a great deal with his potential other than maybe one great season in Buffalo, Sammy Watkins comes into camp running around feeling like a new man, saying that basically he's worked with the Chiefs staff and they've discovered kind of how he should alter his stride, how he runs, different alignment issues. It sounds like some biomechanical stuff that they've looked at with him, how to pre-train, and they feel like they've figured out Sammy Watkins in terms of how to keep him healthy, at least from the standpoint of maybe some issues that he's had repeatedly throughout his career. Are you buying this, Dr. Gene? And if so, can you explain either way, really, what you see behind, that type of stuff that's been reported about Watkins and Chiefs camp?
Yeah, I don't know that we can fully buy things like that. You hear a lot of players try to change things up in the off season, whether it's weight changes or stride changes or any number of those things in a way to be a little bit more productive and more durable for whatever that's worth than they were the previous season. And I think those are good things. But NFL training staffs are trying to do this with all their players as much as they can. They want them to be symmetric. They want areas that have been suspect and concerns in the past to be as ready for the regular season as they can get them. And I think that's very possible. And with all the changes that may or may not go on with the Kansas City offense, with, Kareem Hunt's not there anymore. We're not sure what's going to happen with Tyreek Hill. It may not be as much how durable and healthy as Sammy Watkins. It's just that he's going to get a larger share of the offense going forward. So I think we'll have a better sense of how things go pretty early in the preseason. If we hear about the foot, if we hear about any soft tissue things, then, this is just sort of what Sammy Watkins is. If they let him practice full go without any limitations and he gets through the preseason, including some preseason gameplay without much difficulty, then I think there's reason to be optimistic about him. But, there's been enough issues with Watkins where you like to hear things like that, where teams are actively addressing it and they're confident they've got some improvement going on there. But this is, for me, I think this is going to be not necessarily I believe it when I see it, but I'd like to see him effective before we trust that it can be something that persists over a 17-game season.
It is the Audible Live here Thursday nights on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/footballguys, DOTCOM. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share the video so YouTube actually lets people know it's out there. Anyway, we're talking to Dr. Jene Bramel about the injury situations. Of course, check out footballguys.com. You'll see Jene Bramel's reports. You'll see Matt Waldman's work. You'll see Sigmund Bloom's projections. And you'll see my commentary on the news. So we've got you covered at footballguys.com. Also, our Draft Dominator is free this year. So get to your app store, whether it's Android or iPhone, and get the Draft Dominator to win your league. Dr. Gene, it is a Broncos show. So I have to ask you about Phillip Lindsey and the wrist and the fact that the team wouldn't let him take handoffs, the fact that the team wouldn't let him catch passes, the fact that he's technically behind schedule in his recovery because the initial timeline was 4 to 6 months. We're past the 6-month mark now, and he's really done nothing other than run through the ropes this offseason. Now, they say come training camp, which is early for the Broncos, it's July 17th, 18th, something like that, because they play in the Hall of Fame game. It's early for the Broncos. They say that Phillip Lindsey will be, a full participant, day one of training camp. I don't necessarily believe that. I think they will ease him in. I think it's wise to ease him in. So this injury, your concerns, by the way, Royce Freeman's looked fantastic. I almost said spectacular and fantastic at the same time. Spectastic, fantacular, whatever you want to say. But Dr. Gene, it's something we've discussed quite a bit on this show, and Phillip Lindsey and maybe needing a smaller role because he's a smaller back who doesn't shy away from contact.
I like fantacular. Let's go with that instead. It's been 6 months since his surgery, probably a little bit more than that, depending on exactly when that happened in December. And, if we're not allowing players to take handoffs, if we're not allowing players to take contact with a wrist injury, and those ligament/bone injuries in the wrist can be difficult to recover from, I think the worry is probably more range of motion than anything else. I worry a little bit more this time of year with soft tissue things with running backs in terms of keeping their conditioning up and potentially having compensatory injuries when they ramp things back up as training camp starts. A wrist injury where there's some residual decreased range of motion could limit how he catches passes out of the backfield. I don't think it's going to be a big issue with ball security and whether or not they trust him to run the ball. Wrist injuries don't necessarily, we've seen them with David Johnson and lots of others over the years. I don't know that means that he's too small or not going to be durable enough to take a bigger workload. And I'm wondering, just based on how you've talked about Royce Freeman over the course of the offseason, whether or not he's going to have more of an impact on Phillip Lindsey and his statistical and touch upside more than the injury is at this point. He's another player that, if they clear him on the pre-camp physical and they're not really limiting him much in that first week of the year, first week of the preseason, we probably don't need to worry too much about him. And then we're paying more attention to what the depth chart around him does than the injury itself.
Gene, first of all, and Kenny Pops always in the chat room, stimulates a good idea. If you can find the time this offseason or during the preseason, can you write an article of what the injuries designations on game day during game weeks would be if you were in charge of making up what the designations were? How would you organize this? Because I think I'd like that better than what we have now. All right. I'm going to force you to think. All right. Give me one injury situation. I mean, and I know you might not be totally aware of what the fantasy football hive mind is thinking right now, but you have some sense of it. Give me one injury situation that the fantasy football hive mind is blowing out of proportion and worried about and shouldn't be worried about. And give me one that no one's talking about that maybe we should be a little worried about.
I think the good thing about this year is we don't really have an Andrew Luck situation where there's a ton of uncertainty. I think, kind of leading into the show, that the Todd Gurley thing is, I think everybody wants to be polarized about this, where he's going to be okay, why are we worried about him? To many more saying, I'm super, super worried about what's going on. And again, I think there's reasons for that, but there has to be some sort of happy medium in there in which Todd Gurley is rested, but still healthy enough to be productive. So he's the one that kind of stands out to me as I think we're going to get some more information. And I would imagine that because of the way I'm seeing the trend go with Gurley right now, I think we're going to have a more reassuring outlook on Gurley towards the end of August than not. I think it's less likely that we hear that his knee is already acting up on him at the end of August, probably because the Rams are going to be smart with him, than not. So you're likely to see Gurley's ADP rise a little bit, unless Darrell Henderson is just totally knocking it out of the park as Gurley gets rested. Players I think we should be worried about more. I don't really have one where I feel like there's something more going on there than not. Just scrolling through the position by position things that I did last month, I'm not as worried about Carson Wentz as I was maybe a couple of months ago, where you really weren't sure how worried the Eagles were. I think they got a pretty good deal on his contract, but the fact that they signed him long term is a pretty reassuring thing. We've talked a little bit about Sony Michele already, and I wrote about him saying I think we probably ought to be a little bit more worried about him than there was there. And now we have since heard that he's had a procedure, and it's so much earlier in the preseason than it was before. So that may come up a little bit more as time goes on. But I don't really think I think everybody's kind of where we're supposed to be on Cooper Kupp. I think people are coming around to the idea that, that all the excitement over the ACL recovery of Adrian Peterson a few years ago, I think we're seeing that it still takes players a little bit longer to come back, and that Peterson, as he's been from the very beginning, is an anomaly, and players need a little bit more time to recover. So Cooper Kupp may be a better player in the second half of the season than he is in the beginning. But from what I've seen ADP-wise right now, that looks like for, as good of an offense as the Rams have and as productive as Kupp was last year, where Kupp is going is seeming that, some of those risks are already baked in. I'm not too worried about Travis Kelce. It seems like Jack Doyle's a little bit healthier than what maybe I expected him to be based on that hip labrum surgery. So I think there are going to be some surprises come the end of July where we see a player or two start camp on the PUP list that we didn't expect to, and we'll have to watch pretty carefully. And somebody will show up at camp with an injury that suffered after minicamp, and we'll have to worry about that too. But I don't have one player right now where I'd say, other than sort of temporizing the enthusiasm one way or the other on Gurley, that's much different than expected right now.
Well, Gene, I see that mortar and pestle in the background here, so I have to ask you this question. It's, given the room and furniture that Bloom is sitting on, and it's the most exciting night of his life, what medication did he take? Okay, next question.
What's that buzzing in the background?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Will Fuller, terrific route runner, but right ACL reconstruction, questionable for training camp. Between he and Cooper Kupp, who would you rather be drafting at this point based on, the timing of their ACL tears?
That's a good question. I think, if you're in a PPR league, it's going to be Kupp. I would probably lean towards Kupp as well. The injuries happened similar. Kupp's was a little bit later, so that's a bit of a concern. What we also don't know is which one of those players, if either had any associated injury, was there some meniscus thing that they needed to work through? Was there any other damage that we have some concern about? So I think, Fuller has the benefit of about a month extra recovery time than Kupp, but both of these guys we're talking about having pretty close to 9 months before training camp starts, and we're hearing good things about both of them. I have written, if we haven't seen a player with a significant injury take any snaps at all in OTAs or minicamp, I've kind of listed them questionable because they're on the questionable side of probable. I really don't expect any of those players to start camp on the PUP list. That would raise concern, obviously, for either one of them, but they can't pass the physical enough to at least get to do some individual drills and some conditioning in camp. Then the timetable may change a little bit, but I think given both of them could be expected to get pretty close to what their usual target share has been in the past, albeit maybe not as successful. I would lean gently toward Kupp unless you're looking for a bigger play option down toward the bottom of your roster.
It is the Audible Live here on our YouTube channel. You're also listening, as I can't speak English, perhaps on iTunes. We thank you very much for that. Our chat room reacting to me, reacting to Dr. Gene anyway, and so many questions. Brandon took one right off of my brain, Dr. Gene. Would love to hear Dr. Gene's take on Darius Geis's setbacks.
Yeah, that's a good one to talk about. I didn't like the sound of Darius Geis's setbacks at all. Whenever you hear there's a concern for infection anywhere near a reconstructed ACL graft, you wonder about scarring, you wonder about the integrity of the graft. But pretty much at the same time those extra procedures were reported, we've heard more and more positive things about Geis, and he is expected to recover well, and he's already running. He would be a player that you're a little bit nervous about how well he recovers and how quickly he comes back. But everything around Washington has been so positive about this. I'm anxious and hopeful that he's going to be ready to go from day one. And again, we may see some depth chart things there. I don't think Bryce Love is going to be ready, but there's enough talent there around him that they don't need Geis as a 300 carry. So we may see him as the season goes on become more and more effective. So I've been hearing enough positive things about his knee that I'm more reassured than I would have been otherwise.
So, Gene, did you hear that the Ravens hired 3 new analytics people? Like pretty much from Twitter, I think. Yeah. At least 2 of them were part of Twitter. And they had 3 questions listed on the call out for people to apply. One of them was, do running backs matter? But I'm not going to ask you that. But I am going to ask you one of the other questions.
Of course they matter.
And see if you could have saved the Ravens a lot of money. Like if Steve Biscotti was just watching us right now, you could have saved money instead of hiring 3 analytics gurus. Dr. Gene, what matters more, pass coverage or pass rush?
Pass rush. I think you can do more things with pass coverage if you have the right type of pass rush, and it's a narrow enough question to where I definitely see an argument by which a very strong cornerback can allow you to do things in the back with coverage that you wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. I don't would say it's splitting hairs necessarily, but I'd come down on the side of affecting the line of scrimmage with a good pass rush is probably more effective. Am I right? Is that right, by the way? I don't even know if that's right, but
it's settled.
Probably an answer. Is it settled because I said it's settled?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm going to get. It's a straight line, right? So straight line to the quarterback, right?
I'm sure I'm going to get plenty of tweets about that. So somebody has already. The analytics people have already decided this question, and I'm wrong. Which would not be the first time for sure. All right, what's the next question I can get wrong?
Oh, how about AJ Green? We go back home a little bit for you, and we talk about that right plantar plate repair. Say that 5 times, Cecil.
He is another player that we've heard nothing but positive things through the offseason. The Bengals, as all teams will do, we're going to be a little bit extra cautious with any sort of recovering player, especially somebody that's so important to the offense. So I'm fully expecting him to pass his pre-camp physical, be ready to go early on. I think we're going to see fewer and fewer players participate in preseason games, so that's not going to be a very good milepost for us. But I would expect him to practice and be in good condition to go from day one in camp.
Dr. Jene Bramel, you follow him on Twitter at Jene Bramel. And Gene, we got to keep you around just a little bit longer, another round, maybe 2. Sounds like me at closing time. Because Eric Stoner,
I know,
is in our chat room. Hello,
hello,
Stoner. He says, "What about Cam? Yeah, what about Cam in this new throwing motion? You know, like he's adjusted his throwing motion, so he's not as elongated and everything that involves."
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not enough of a quarterback guru to know whether or not changing throwing motion is going to put any less stress on his arm than what's been there before. I think it was extremely reassuring that he was throwing so soon after his procedure. That lends credence to the argument that we heard from Ron Rivera and Newton himself that when they went into the shoulder, they didn't find anything but a little bit of residual scarring from the procedure he had a couple of years ago, and having him throwing so soon means that there wasn't anything in that joint that they went after strongly that they had to repair in any way. He's already throwing a football. They allowed him to do some work at the end of mini camp. And again, it was mostly 7-on-7 stuff. It wasn't necessarily team drills. And the fact that he's responded well to those time and time again. We haven't had a lot of quarterbacks leading up to Andrew Luck to where there was a lot of concern about throwing programs and such. So hearing week by week, day by day updates on Andrew Luck's throwing situation over the past couple of years has kind of sensitized us to how many throws is he making? What has he been cleared to do? What's the size of the football he's allowed to throw? But I think the most important piece of information about Newton this summer is that he's been cleared to throw at all. Why would you put him out there and risk him in minicamp if you thought there was any concern that any extra strain on a shoulder would be an issue? So I'm pretty reassured about how he's doing. If the Panthers decided that changing his throwing motion would allow him to take fewer hits because he got rid of the ball quicker, or maybe put a little bit less stress on that joint, so be it. But again, nothing but good news from Cam this offseason too.
Gene, there's reports that Eli Manning looks like he's lost something. Some people saying he looks fine, he doesn't look any different. I don't know if that means he already lost it or he still has it, but it strikes me that we have a lot of old quarterbacks. I mean, you can start with Tom Brady, who's going to be setting records for a quarterback his age, except for Brett Favre, who I think actually made it for second there. Did it look like he was going to come back this week?
He said he was hacked, but he's already been hacked once with the Richard picks. You can only use that once. You can only use the hack excuse once. And Favre, just an old man, doesn't know how to use technology. Probably a couple cold pops involved.
He used it up. So, there's Rivers and your favorite player in the NFL, Ben Roethlisberger. They came into the league with Eli Manning. There's Drew Brees. In your medical opinion, Dr. Gene, should we be concerned about any of these oldsters hitting the wall this year?
Sure, always. But I feel like the mental processing skills of those players can sometimes, as we saw with Peyton Manning, who could barely throw the ball and still challenging to win Super Bowls. The mental processing skills of those players, their ability to maneuver in the pocket are important. Ben Roethlisberger still has it. Tom Brady still has it. I think Eli Manning proved last year that he probably doesn't have any of those things enough to make up for the loss of arm strength and to overcome whatever offensive line issues or otherwise may be going on. And losing Odell Beckham obviously isn't going to help either. So you will play Sesame Street. Which one of these is not like the other? I think Eli clearly stands out as the troublesome part of that trio.
Well, Eric Stoner, you already have two young men that you've gotten here. Congratulations. If you get two more, you could have something better than the steel curtain. You could have the Stoner wall. So get to work. And on behalf of you, I know that you've asked me this question, so I'm going to ask Dr. Gene, which is, when you look at DK Metcalf and that amount of muscle that he is, what kind of chance is there of him basically running through one of his muscles and leaving like his, basically his hamstring on the field because of how big and explosive he is?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know for certain because, without knowing what his, certainly by watching him running routes would make you think that the range of motion in those joints are a little bit concerned, and that amount of bulk on those joints could eventually become a problem. But I have no way of knowing that for sure. If he's symmetric, his muscles on one side versus the other, and he's not stressing one part of his body more than the other side, or his extensors and flexors are activating equally, all those sorts of things. I don't know any of the answers to those questions, but yeah, I mean, I think there's reason. You guys asked me a lot about are we worried about a player who's gaining 10 pounds this offseason or otherwise, and it depends on where the weight is. It depends on how the weight was put on. It depends on if it's appropriate for his body type and flexibility and all those sorts of things. And I think, from my reading of your rookie scouting portfolio and what other folks have had to say through the offseason, is it looks like range of motion could be a problem for him when you see what his 3-cone scores were like and his short shuttle skills were like. And maybe that's not his game. Maybe they don't ask him to do those things and we're just asking him to run in a straight line. But calf muscles, quads, and hamstrings are important for explosiveness off the line. And if he's a little bit tight and stiff in those areas, even if he is going to bulldoze a cornerback in press coverage, he's still putting himself at risk. So we'll see how that develops. I think, yes, anytime you have a concern about somebody being X body fat at that size, you're a little bit worried about whether or not he may be too strong for what his joints can handle.
Hallelujah and praise the Almighty. Dr. Jene Bramel has returned to the program. Follow him on Twitter at Jene Bramel. Dr. Gene, good seeing you, buddy.
I am laughing at Jared's top 3 genes here.
By the way, we also have a question from Zara Kant Zabedian. You got any Bill Shakespeare on that bookshelf, Doctor? I know you have my Krieger action figure that I got
he's
from
back there.
Archer.
The Shakespeare is up in front of me. I still have I took a Shakespeare class in college. Well, is it? I don't know. Maybe I don't see it. I got too much stuff here that I don't look at anymore.
No, phone book looking deal. One of those.
Is it the what?
The big phone book looking deal.
Yeah, but I don't know. I'm probably looking in the wrong direction. It's around here. Yes, somewhere I have some Shakespeare in here. Not that I remember much of it, but it's around here somewhere.
All right. Well, it's great to see you, my friend, and look forward to the next time we get to have you on the show.
Good to see you all again. Thanks for having me back. See you.
And there we have him, Dr. Jene Bramel. Follow him on Twitter at Jene Bramel. Sigmund Bloom react to Jene Bramel, and it's specifically talking the cam stuff to me was very interesting because that's something that I think muscle memory. He goes back to his throwing motion. There's a lot of over torque in his old throwing motion. It's just a little bit of a concern there.
Well, I think that Cam Newton represents one of the bigger question marks at quarterback. There aren't that many question marks. So to say that he's a bigger question mark to return to form than, say, Carson Wentz, I think, at this point. So I think that also infects all the Carolina players and adds a little bit more risk. We split hairs in the top 4 running backs, but it's a risk factor for Christian McCaffrey that is not a risk factor for Alvin Kamara. It's not a risk factor for Ezekiel Elliott. There's a different quarterback risk factor for Saquon Barkley. And then DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel, who's underrated anyway. I mean, these are players that you have to have some uncertainty added to their picture because of Cam. And also in reality, and as more and more offenses become innovative, even though the offense did well, I'm not sure that it was really that innovative with Norv Turner. So that's something else that gives me pause about Carolina's offense in general. But their offensive line should be better than it was going into the year last year.
Yeah, it should be, and they're expecting Darrell Williams and Matt Paradis both to be ready there. Matt, when we talk about Cam Newton, we look at the numbers, obviously, and watch the film from last year. His completion percentage spiked because it was just he was finally comfortable with taking what the defense gave him and throwing short passes. Bloom mentioned Curtis Samuel. I'm excited to see more of Curtis Samuel, but how much more, and how about this concern with Cam?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the issue with Cam's shoulder is going to be something that exists until we see him finish this season. I mean, I think that pretty much from up at least till midseason, we're gonna have questions about how long that can hold up and whether or not he's going to lose velocity on the arm again because he's had another offseason procedure and now he's had to change things around again. So. And then, of course, they added Will Grier, who was a very nice quarterback prospect that they were able to get later on, and that raises further questions down the line. But looking at Curtis Samuel, certainly, a lot of people really are in love with him and what he can do for this team. What he's not going to do for this team is anything different than what DJ Moore already does. And DJ Moore, actually, I would say, is an even better after the catch player statistically than what Curtis Samuel does. So they're similar role players, which they've used them inventively in that fashion on occasion where you kind of wonder which one is going to get the ball from the backfield, which one is going to go out for a pass. But one of them needs to develop an element of their game to go up and win the ball above the rim. If one of them can actually do that, then you have more of a complete player, and you don't have a guy who's just you got to hit them in stride over the middle or on a comeback route or on something where they get some separation and they can continue running down the field. And certainly Chris Hogan isn't going to be that player. So, you've got three good receivers, but it's an offense where what you want is an anticipatory quarterback, which is something that Cam Newton really isn't great at. But he did get better, like you said, at check down passes, actually throwing the ball accurately to Christian McCaffrey in stride. So, hopefully as he continues to age, quarterbacks, usually what we see is just as they really start to get the game, their body starts breaking down. So Cam Newton's kind of in that cross section where we might actually see a little bit more of an anticipatory game from him. It's just a matter of can that shoulder hold up?
Yeah, it's a survival thing with Cam Newton. Just stay out there and keep playing strong football for the Carolina Panthers. By the way, Matt, can you believe Matthew Stafford played with that injury?
Yes.
Like when I read that report and I heard about it, I was like, what the? Sorry, Joe. Like, what the? Lions, why are you so stupid?
Yeah.
Why was this awful Stafford injury that he's playing with? I mean, my respect for Matthew Stafford is already sky high anyway. I know that's a great debate on, is he really good or whatever? Like, Matthew Stafford is an elite level player. But playing with that injury, Matt, I guess it kind of pissed me off.
Yeah, it's kind of silly that they would do that, but at the same time, you wonder because it's just the same thing with the Todd Gurley issue. Todd Gurley, who we talked about this with the whole, playing in high school, couldn't run the straight line in championship game because 3 ankle sprains on 2 ankles, and now he was playing with an MCL tear, and they didn't know he had an MCL tear, probably because he probably just said he hit it, so. I would think Matthew Stafford's probably that same kind of player. He probably hit it as much as he could to whatever extent. And he's always been that kind of, we remember the game where he basically told Dante Culpepper to go back and sit down and come back into that game and win it, So, yeah, exactly. So when you look at that Jets game, we knew after that Monday night game when he got hit the way he did that something was definitely wrong and he wasn't right for the rest of the season. And a lot of people were like, "Oh, you're Matthew Stafford, you're an apologist," but now you're looking at multiple cracks in his back, and Cam Newton played with fractures in his back as well. So these guys are warriors, and if there's nobody really behind them to play, there's probably a lot of pressure for them to go out there and make something happen and try and keep this team afloat. And I'm with you, but I'm just trying to explore the other side of it.
Bloom, it looks like you're in deep thought, probably thinking about what Paul Charchian told you about the Lions offense. I love the opening this week. Of course, we do a cold open on the show because nothing pisses me off more. I watch YouTube more than regular TV except for football games. And when I watch these shows, Collider Video or whatever, and they introduce the goddamn hosts every week that you already know, daily shows, and it's like you waste time. No, you get to GTB, get to business. You did that on the couch, and Charge told you about Kerryon Johnson. Kind of fits with what we're talking about with Matthew Stafford.
Yeah, we're on the Lions. And didn't Stafford play and maybe even win, like in the fourth quarter with a broken rib, rookie year, early in his career? Why am I remembering?
Yeah, the Dante Culpa, move over, Dante. Just sit down. Go back and sit down on the bench.
Yeah, so, we know that's in his genes as we're doing all these playing on Dr. Gene, the return of Dr. Gene.
I got to go get some jeans on.
No, it's good. And look, Kerryon Johnson. So, again, I think that our rankings right now, our feelings about players are half-baked. And I'm open to Kerryon Johnson being one of my main targets. It was Josh Jacobs in early drafts. I like Jacobs. I'm excited about John Gruden overusing him, like he did Cadillac Williams. But it really, Kerryon Johnson was outstanding last year. I mean, if you were watching Kerryon Johnson to see how he would translate to the NFL, he looked fantastic. It was a best case scenario. Just if you took, how his burst would translate, how his power would translate. He was growing as a player, and he was one of the best all-around backs, like Jacobs, in his draft class. So if Detroit is going to stay more conservative on offense, and you hear about them dabbling in these 3 tight end sets, which I think they're going to just use like a herd of buffalo going down the plain with Kerryon Johnson behind them. So does that be like riding herd, Cease? I don't know. See, I shouldn't even try that, right?
But no, you did a good job riding herd when you try to keep your cattle herd together and you ride on the sides and behind them.
Yeah. So I would say that Kerryon Johnson has a chance to become somebody we really like. And CJ Anderson also is a player we shouldn't forget as a top handcuff, an instant injury. And Kerryon Johnson missed time last year. But I do think it highlights why I'm less warm on TJ Hawkinson, probably even on Kenny Golladay. Marvin Jones is always underrated, but I think that it's not going to be a robust pass offense. And I think that Kerryon Johnson is really the only meaningful fantasy player from the Lions that you have to take a stand on, and the stand is whether to take him in the 3rd round. And that might look very, very good.
And the fact that they've been talking about Theo Riddick might not make the team.
And as soon as that happens, everyone's going to be all over him, when really it's not that it's not, we wouldn't, like, we're talking about it now, so factor it into your ranking instead of making a lurch up whenever it happens.
All right, back to the chat room reacting to us. Brandon asks, is he crazy for drinking the Kenyon Drake Kool-Aid? Oh, yeah, Matt. Kenyon Drake Kool-Aid is not enough sugar?
Hey, listen, I know that my reaction to Kenyon Drake being drafted by the Miami Dolphins was probably one of the funnier moments that we had on that show. But now I've kind of seen the light, and part of that is watching him develop. I think that he got a master's course from Frank Gore and actually paid attention. And you can see him becoming a more efficient runner, a more conceptually sound runner. And Adam Gase is gone. So I'm projecting 1,600 total yards and 10 touchdowns out of Kenyon Drake, which makes him, a borderline top 10, top 15 running back. So I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. Of course, I am probably I'm probably on the more crazy side of the 3 of us when it comes to certain things. So just keep that in mind.
Name one of those things. Just one. Not all of them. Just one of them.
One of the things that I'm on the crazier side with?
Yeah, compared to us.
Oh, basically late round players. I mean, pretty much all the time. I mean, I think, Byron Pringle probably being a number 3 wide receiver and having him probably in my top 25 of wide receivers right now.
By the way, Pringle's standing out. You saw that, Matt? Because ESPN did a great article, and Jeff Legwald picked Troy Fumagalli, but they had all of their NFL Nation writers pick one of the, kind of surprise standouts from OTAs. And again, drum beats. We're listening for drum beats. And Pringle was on that list. Bloom made me perk up.
It should, because it's Patrick Mahomes' targets.
And he did that last year, too, by the way. He just got hurt with a hamstring.
Right. I mean, when there's a Tyreek Hill factor. And this is something, because we're in that pause in the calendar. And Bill Belichick is on vacation. So we should all take a vacation. Like, if Bill freaking Belichick knows to take a vacation, folks, take a vacation. Like, even if it's just a mental vacation, I try to take one of those a day at least.
I think I'm being blinded thinking of him in like a Hawaiian shirt.
So during this time, I think that it's important for us to remember that we've been staring at these depth charts. We've been thinking about the draft and free agency and how all these players fit together and coaching changes. Everyone's starting to kind of dig in, plant their flags, etc. And then we're going to get some more information in training camp and preseason. Some people might say it's less important than we think it is. It'll move some players around. But we're seeing this as somewhat static. And the good organizations, not all the organizations, but the good organizations, when practices start, aren't going to care what draft picks they spent on players, how much money they paid for players. They are just going to watch these guys do their job and hopefully rationally, again, in Bill Belichick terms, like just play the best players. So if Mecole Hardman, he might be great, but if Pringle looks more ready to do that job than Hardman, Pringle, and there's no Tyreek Hill because of suspension, Pringle could be, and he has a year experience in the system, at least being in the organization ahead of Hardman. So you're not crazy, Matt. You're just more of a true believer. And I know I'm a true believer. Whenever you see the light, it's hard to unsee it.
It's your pineal gland.
Third eye.
Yes. Open it up. See the light here on the Audible, the Footballguys.com podcast. We thank you all for listening, for watching us here on YouTube, and for commenting in the chat room. And if we're going to move on from Kenyon Drake and we're going to continue this discussion, we've had some discussion about the 49ers backfield. Matt, how are you projecting that?
Whoever's healthy, basically is where I'm looking at that, because really I've joked that they're like the minion backfield because they all kind of look the same.
Banana.
Yeah, exactly. I think maybe Georgia State running backs should just be called the minions. I mean, excuse me, Georgia Southern, not Georgia State. But certainly you look at this backfield and it seems like Tevin Coleman would be the best opportunity. The guy with the best opportunity, knows the Shanahan offense well. Shanahan knows how to use him well and make the most of him. But at the same time, you've got guys like McKinnon and Breida who are fine players, and Breida especially flashed last year a fair bit. But I think that these guys, in terms of how I ended up projecting them when I look at the San Francisco offense, it's a situation right now where I have Coleman leading, but in terms of maybe total yardage, but Breida actually out rushing him and McKinnon not being that far away, and that the touchdowns being split fairly evenly enough that none of these guys in my mind are ones that I really want to draft and make a stand on early. Like maybe 7th to 10th round, whoever's available there, that's where I'm looking. And maybe Matt Breida to me might be, draft the lowest guy in terms of ADP and get the most potential value out of him. And hopefully he's the one that's healthy at the end. That's kind of been my approach.
How do you approach it, Bloom?
Yeah, I think that, and when we have these uncertainty backfields, it is best to draft the cheapest. I know it's a really simplistic rule, but it's going to guide you to players that, not thinking about that rule, you should be guided to anyway, like Damian Harris, like Mike Davis. In these uncertain backfields, take the cheapest guy. And in this one, actually, if we're going to follow the rule, Matt, if we're going to follow the rule to a T, it's Raheem Mostert who's going undrafted.
Yeah.
And as long as his forearm's okay, and he looked good. I mean, look, again, forget about pedigree, forget about what we know about these players. Just watch some Raheem Mostert last year. Watch some Breida. Watch McKinnon from Minnesota. Watch Coleman in Atlanta. Try to tell me that there's a distinct separation between these players' ability level. I mean, you might argue one or the other in different ways, but they're roughly the same wattage caliber running back, with Mostert having yeah, right. and Mostert has a much smaller sample size on an NFL field than they do. So really, actually, I think the best approach, there's one way that Tevin Coleman could be the pick here, and he's cheap enough that it's an interesting proposition, is that he's the healthiest now. He's going to be the healthiest going into the season. Kyle Shanahan loves him. Remember all the talk that was going to be him over Devontae Freeman because Shanahan loves him, and that may or may not be true, the love part. And then Coleman just takes the job and runs away with it. It's possible. I think Breida and McKinnon are probably not worth drafting unless Coleman goes down almost immediately. And really the way to play this, not just Mostert on waiver wire speed dial, but wait, because people are going to get impatient with their San Francisco running back that's not getting opportunity, or their San Francisco running back that just got hurt. And then later on in the season, we can see who's building momentum. We do our roster churn at the bottom of our roster. San Francisco 49ers running backs will be a lot more interesting for free on the waiver wire than having to hold them through the waves from the beginning of the season.
There might be even a third Georgia Southern running back who might make this team.
Who's the third one?
I don't remember his name, to be honest with you. I got to look it up in a minute here. But
right.
Well,
but
I think it's
Dante
Devontae Jackson here in Denver because he's looked really good, but he's Georgia State, I think, or West Georgia.
Yeah, I have to look it up real quick. It won't take me very long here, but
by the way, for me, fellas, it is Tevin Coleman. I know y'all say get the cheapest guy, and it's not because of my man crush on Tevin Coleman. Bloom, it has to do with what you said. Kyle Shanahan loves him, but I'll take it one step further. There's how do I put this? People around the league feel like there's a sense of desperation with Kyle Shanahan. They feel like there's a sense of, oh, shut your mouth. I got to win like this year. What do you do as a person? What's human nature when you have your back against the wall? You lean on those you trust the most. That to me is Tevin Coleman. He may not be healthy all year, but I'm going to ride it out as much as I possibly can and pick up Tevin Coleman and start Tevin Coleman and hope that, well, Kyle Shanahan works this season, because if it doesn't, he might be gone, even though he initially had that, 6-year deal.
Right. That seems absurd. By the way, I'm not saying what you're saying isn't true. In fact, the worst, and Matt is always good at bringing in the management, the problems of the NFL are the same problems of any workplace. We just see them out in open view, or we speculate on them a lot more. But yeah, that seems absurd to me, just because he has, with the Garoppolo injury last year, we haven't had a chance yet to see what this offense can do when the pieces are in place. And then you have to at least, and the defense has been an absolute mess. And if Kyle Shanahan does get fired, it's probably much more because of his choosing of a defensive coordinator and how that went, and all the resources they've been throwing after this defensive line. Another one, Nick Bosa, this year, than any problem with the offense. Because to abstract this out to a larger fantasy football take level, I think that what the 49ers offense did last year after Garoppolo went down was heroic. Beathard may not last that long in the league after he's out of the 49ers organization. And Mullins was good, and they also had injuries at wide receiver, all the injuries at running back. And this was still a viable offense most weeks, where a lot of teams, when you put those quarterbacks in, their offenses would not be viable. So it's possible the San Francisco offense could be a bit of a sleeping giant if Garoppolo is what they hoped. But I sure hope that Shanahan gets at least another year after this year, no matter what happens.
I'm excited about Coleman, and I'm excited about Dante Pettis. Matt, who do you got? Yeah. Who's that last guy? Who do we know?
Wesley Fields is the name of that guy. I don't know if he made the team, but he was invited for a tryout after the draft. So we'll see if he's in the fourth quarter of some games in the preseason.
Well, what do you think of the Dante Pettis and maybe sleeping giant that's in San Francisco potentially?
Well, I mean, I think Dante Pettis was the best wide receiver in the draft last year. So the fact that he came out and they like how he's added a little bit more weight to his frame, the fact that he looks a little more explosive, the fact also that this team likes him so much that you're not hearing about lack of separation. What you're hearing more is the spin of he runs routes differently than other guys. Which means that he gets separation, but he does it in a way that's a little less traditional, and you have to get used to that in the same way that maybe teams had to trust Larry Fitzgerald a little bit more to throw him the ball, or that Brandon Lloyd may not be extremely fast, but he gets open. And to me, Dante Pettis is kind of a mix of Brandon Lloyd and Odell Beckham, in terms of styles of play. And we're going to, certainly now you're hearing Deebo Samuel needs to cut weight in order to be a slot guy. That's what Wes Welker wants him to do, and he's starting to cut weight to work on that. And I worry about guys cutting weight early, at this point of the season as rookies after a long, workout period to get drafted. and I wonder about injury and that type of thing. So he's kind of sliding down my list a little bit more in terms of caution. And Hurd, I think, is while we find him very interesting long term, I don't think he's really the biggest answer. So it's going to be more guys like Taylor, Kittle, and Pettis being those guys. And I think Pettis is someone who will take that next step forward. And I like him as someone who will provide you, I think probably close to wide receiver 2 numbers, and maybe some weeks, some dominant wide receiver 1 weeks on occasion.
Matt, have you done any? Go ahead, Bloom.
Well, I want to just step in here and gush for a second about Marquis Goodwin. Who, by the way, I know this will be like nails on a chalkboard. The Pelicans also had the number 8 pick. They've got so many first-round picks, all the first-round picks. They had the number 1 pick and the number 8 pick and the number.
I love how cute the NBA draft is. It's so cute. It gets like one day of coverage and then no one cares.
Yeah,
your first 3 picks are done and then nobody cares.
Bloom?
It's running, yeah, right. It's running about even with the Women's World Cup, which is to say the Women's World Cup is going to be an exciting event to watch, as the NBA draft has been very exciting for me. Another UT player like Marquis Goodwin. But I think Marquis Goodwin, I have no idea why we've just moved on collectively from him. 17th, 18th, 19th round pick. He was Garoppolo's guy. They have that chemistry, and snaps go down. He has such high-value targets going downfield. If Pettis takes a step forward and Kittle's Kittle, then that's good for Marquis Goodwin. And I think that how quickly we forget that we were drafting him in the 5th, 6th, 7th round as, well, he's going to be Garoppolo's wide receiver 1. He's going to be a wide receiver 1 in a Kyle Shanahan system. We know what that has meant, possibly. I'm not saying he's going to do anything approaching what we expected when we were taking him there, but I haven't moved on from him. Not yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. I think the only reason that they probably shied away from him and drafted a bunch of receivers to replace him is that he's a track athlete. And like John Ross, who's suffering from tightness, an unspecified tightness, Marquis Goodwin is also wound up pretty tight as a track athlete. Yeah. And that may be the issue, is that they just don't feel like they can rely on him to last the season or a heavy workload.
All right, it is the Audible Live. Super, super quick, Matt. And this one's kind of out of left field, but I just want to ask you, have you watched any Marcus Sims? Because our friend, draftanalyst.com, Tony Pauling, has reported that West Virginia wide receiver Marcus Sims has filed the necessary paperwork to enter the supplemental draft. He did enter the NCAA transfer portal back in April when he said he was leaving the Mountaineers, shaking his fist from West Virginia. We know that in 3 seasons with the Mountaineers, 87 receptions, 1,400 yards, 8 touchdowns. Also know there were some issues with eligibility. I think that was the case in the transfer program. There might have been some off-field disciplinary stuff as well there with Marcus Sims. No date yet for the supplemental draft, but he's also going to start working out for teams in early July. Do you have any notes on him? Anything there?
Not yet at this point, but good to know. So it'll be something that I'll get ready before the supplemental draft and get a chance to watch him a bit.
And he's the first one. He's the first, the supplemental RSP. He's the first player to
newsletter.
There you go. Rookie scouting portfolio. Check it out at mattwaldman.com. Bloom, final thoughts from your bed.
Oh, what a night. Yeah. Everyone come. There's a lot of room on my bed. Look, it's been a good night. It's been a very, very positive night with the return of Dr. Gene. I'm excited. I've made Matt crack up so many times tonight. It could be a new Audible drinking game.
Everybody come. I'm so excited. It's all sorts of things.
Dude, if you wear a robe next time on your bed.
Oh, I've got the black robe next time. Yes.
See? And then it's like, just, is the belt tied? I don't know.
No. See, now we're totally turning this inside out and making it Freudian because I'm in my bed. Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. So whatever you're thinking, Cecil, whatever you're thinking, Matt, whatever you're thinking out there, that's from you. That's from your brain, not me and me being in my bed.
You're innocent.
Yep.
Always. We appreciate you guys. It is vacation time. Next couple of weeks will be touchy on what we're going to do as far as Thursday night. So we'll talk behind the scenes and we'll let y'all know. Follow the Audible on Twitter at the Audible. Matt Waldman is at Matt Waldman. Sigmund Bloom is at Sigmund Bloom. I am at Cecil Lammey. For the great Dr. Gene, the spectacular Matt Waldman, and the amazing Sigmund Bloom, I'm Web of Cecil Lammey saying thanks for watching. Stay tuned. And as always, stay frosty.